1204 AD, Constantinople, the richest city in the Christian world, 1,000 years old, walls that had never been breached, libraries filled with ancient knowledge, churches covered in gold, markets overflowing with silk, spices, and jewels from 3 continents. The capital of the Byzantine Empire, the heir to Rome, the greatest city on earth. And on April 12, 1204 it burned. Crusaders scaled the walls, Christian soldiers sacking a Christian city. For 3 days they looted. Murdered, raped, destroyed, treasures that had survived a millennium were melted down, libraries were burned, churches were desecrated. The richest city in Christendom was destroyed by Christians. Why? Debt. The Byzantines owed money, and the creditors came to collect. This is the story of how Venice bankrupted Byzantium with one loan, the most expensive loan in history. Let's go back 33 years. 1171, Constantinople was still magnificent. The Byzantine Empire had survived for over 800 years since the fall of Rome. It had weathered Persian invasions, Arab conquests, barbarian hordes, internal rebellions, and religious schisms. It was weaker than its peak under Justinian in the 6th century, but still powerful, still rich, still the crossroads of East and West. The city had a population of 400,000. Larger than any city in Western Europe. Paris had 25,000. London had 18,000. Constantinople dwarfed them all. The Byzantine economy was based on trade: silk from China, spices from India, grain from Egypt, furs from Russia, gold from Africa. Everything passed through Constantinople. The city took a cut. Customs taxes filled the imperial treasury, and controlling much of this trade were the Venetians. Venice was a merchant republic built on a lagoon in northern Italy. They had no farmland, no natural resources, just ships and ambition. The Venetians were the greatest merchants and sailors in Europe. They dominated Mediterranean trade, and they had a special relationship with Byzantium. For centuries, Venice had been granted trading privileges in Byzantine ports, reduced tariffs, exclusive warehouses, legal protections. In return, Venice provided ships and support when Byzantium needed it. It was mutually beneficial. Venice got rich, Byzantium got naval power, but the relationship was unequal. Venetian merchants in Constantinople grew wealthy. They controlled entire neighborhoods. They didn't pay the same taxes as Byzantine merchants. They operated outside Byzantine law. The Byzantines resented them. These foreign merchants growing fat on Byzantine trade, treating Constantinople like their own city. 1171. Emperor Manuel decided enough was enough. He ordered the arrest of all Venetian merchants in the Byzantine Empire. Thousands were imprisoned. Their property was confiscated. Their ships were seized. Why did Manuel do this? He wanted to break Venetian economic dominance, assert Byzantine control, show that Constantinople was not Venice's colony. It was a bold move, nationalist, economically rational, and strategically catastrophic. Because Venice did not forgive, Venice did not forget, and Venice would have its revenge. The Venetian government demanded compensation: return our merchants, return our property, pay damages. Manuel refused. He had made his decision. Byzantine sovereignty over foreign merchants. Venice sent a fleet to attack Byzantine islands. Small raids, harassment, intimidation, but Byzantium was still powerful. Manuel's military repelled the attacks. For 30 years, relations were frozen. Venice seethed, Byzantium moved on, and then everything changed. 1171, a new crisis. The Byzantine throne was contested. Emperor Alexios III had overthrown his brother Isaac II and blinded him. Standard Byzantine politics. Violent, ruthless family betrayal. But Isaac's son, young Alexios, escaped to the west. He sought help. He wanted to reclaim his father's throne, and he made a desperate offer. Alexios IV, as he called himself, approached the leaders of the Fourth Crusade. These crusaders were gathering in Venice. Their mission: sail to Egypt, conquer Cairo, use it as a base to retake Jerusalem. A noble plan, a holy mission, but there was a problem. The Crusaders couldn't pay for the ships. Venice had built a fleet for them: 50 war galleys, 450 transport ships, enough to carry 33,500 men and 4,500 horses. The agreed price: 85,000 silver marks. That's roughly 19 tons of silver, approximately $50 million in today's money. The Crusaders had raised only 51,000 marks. They were 34,000 marks short, 8 tons of silver. They owed Venice a fortune, and they had no way to pay. Doge of Venice, Enrico Dandolo, was 97 years old. Blind, supposedly blinded by the Byzantines decades earlier during a diplomatic incident. Whether this was true or Byzantine propaganda, Dandolo believed it, and he hated Byzantium. Now he held the Crusaders hostage. They were stranded in Venice. No ships, no way to fulfill their vows. Desperate, and Dandolo had a proposal. He said to the Crusade leaders, "You owe me money. You cannot pay, but I have a solution. Help me with some business first, then we'll consider the debt forgiven." The Crusaders were suspicious. What business? Dandolo revealed his plan: attack Zara, a city on the Dalmatian coast, a rival trading port, a thorn in Venice's side. One problem: Zara was Christian. It was under the protection of the King of Hungary, who was himself a crusader. Attacking Zara meant Christians attacking Christians. The Pope forbade it, explicitly. Excommunication for anyone who participated. The Crusaders were trapped. No money, no ships, no options. They agreed. November 1202. The Crusader fleet attacked Zara, besieged it, conquered it, looted it. Venice got what it wanted, a rival eliminated. The Crusaders got excommunication. The Pope was furious, but he needed the crusade, so he quietly lifted the excommunication with conditions: never again, no more attacking Christians, go to the Holy Land, do what you vowed. The Crusaders agreed. But Danilo had other plans. Winter 1202. The fleet was in Zara, and young Alexios IV arrived, the Byzantine prince, with an offer. He said, "Help me take Constantinople, restore my father to the throne, and I will pay you." "What will you pay?" "Everything." Alexios made staggering promises: 200,000 silver marks to the crusade, 10,000 Byzantine soldiers to join the crusade, food and supplies for a year, and most importantly, the reunification of the Eastern and Western churches. The Great Schism of 1054 had split Christianity. The Pope in Rome, the Patriarch in Constantinople, centuries of theological disputes. Alexios promised to end it, bring the Byzantine Church under papal authority. It was an incredible offer, too good to be true. And it was, because Alexios didn't have 200,000 marks. The Byzantine treasury didn't have that much. He was promising money he didn't possess, to repay a debt to Venice, using another debt to Crusaders. It was a debt pyramid scheme. But the Crusaders believed him, or wanted to, or had no choice, because they still owed Venice, and Venice wanted this. Danilo pushed hard for the plan. Constantinople was the ultimate prize. Control Constantinople and you control East-West trade. This wasn't about religion. This was about economics. This was about revenge. For 1171, for decades of humiliation, Venice would have its pound of flesh. June 1203. The Crusader fleet arrived at Constantinople. The Byzantine people were shocked. "What are Crusaders doing here? You're supposed to be going to Jerusalem, fighting Muslims, not besieging Christians." Emperor Alexios III looked out from the walls, saw the fleet, saw the siege engines, and he panicked. He fled, abandoned the throne, ran away in the night. The Crusaders hadn't even attacked yet, and the emperor ran. Young Alexios entered Constantinople in triumph. Restored his blind father Isaac II to the throne. They ruled together, co-emperors, and now the bill came due. Alexios IV owed the Crusaders 200,000 marks. He had promised, now deliver. Alexios searched the treasury, empty. The previous emperors had spent it on wars, on bribes, on palaces. There wasn't enough. He raised taxes. The people protested. He confiscated church treasures, melted down sacred objects. The clergy revolted. He still couldn't pay. The Crusaders waited outside the city walls, growing impatient, growing angry. Months passed. Alexios kept saying, "Soon, I'll pay soon, I just need more time." The Crusaders said, "We've waited long enough." The Byzantines said, "We don't owe you anything. You placed a usurper on our throne." The tensions exploded. January 1204. Palace coup. Alexios IV was overthrown, strangled. His father Isaac died of shock or was poisoned. Accounts vary. A new emperor took power, Alexios V. Doukas. His message to the Crusaders: "Leave now, you will not be paid. Get out of Byzantine territory." The Crusaders were furious. They had come here for money. They had been promised payment. They had installed this ungrateful dynasty. And now they were being told to leave empty-handed, after months of waiting. While still owing Venice, no, they would take payment by force. The Crusaders made a pact with Venice: attack Constantinople, loot it, split the treasure, whatever we find we divide. Venice gets 3/8. The Crusaders get 5/8, and whoever conquers the city gets to choose the new emperor. It was agreed. March 1204. The siege began. The Venetians had been building siege equipment all winter: towers, ladders, rams. The Crusaders had the largest army Constantinople had faced in centuries. But Constantinople had never fallen. The walls were impregnable, 40 feet high, 30 feet thick, towers every 60 feet, a double wall system, a moat. For 900 years no enemy had breached them. The Byzantines were confident. Let them try. April 9, 1204. The first assault. The Crusaders attacked by land, the Venetians attacked by sea. The Venetian ships had flying bridges, wooden platforms that could extend from ships to the walls. Soldiers could cross directly onto the battlements. Brilliant engineering, terrifying. The Byzantines fought desperately. They poured boiling oil, threw stones, shot arrows. The walls held. The Crusaders were repelled. Dozens died. The assault failed. The Byzantines celebrated. The walls remained unbreached. Constantinople was safe, but Danilo was not finished. April 12, 1204. The second assault, this time better coordinated, better prepared. The Venetians focused their ships on one section of wall, the northern harbor side. The wind was favorable. The ships approached. The flying bridges extended, and a Venetian soldier, Peter of Amiens, leaped onto the wall. Others followed. A breach, a foothold. The Byzantines rushed to defend, but more Crusaders climbed up. More ships attached. More soldiers poured onto the walls. The gates were opened from inside. The Crusaders flooded in. Sack of Constantinople began. For 3 days it didn't stop. Crusaders looted every building. Churches, monasteries, palaces, homes. They stole everything: gold, silver, jewels, silks, relics, the accumulated wealth of 1,000 years, the crown of thorns, the true cross fragments, icons painted by St. Luke, treasures beyond measure. They melted down golden statues, smashed silver artwork, stripped buildings of marble. The Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in Christendom, was desecrated. Horses were brought inside. Prostitutes danced on the altar. Sacred objects were used as drinking cups. Drunken soldiers urinated on holy relics. The Library of Constantinople contained ancient texts, Greek and Roman classics, scientific treatises, historical records, irreplaceable, unique copies of works lost everywhere else. The Crusaders burned it, they couldn't read Greek, the books were worthless to them, centuries of knowledge turned to ash. The killing was indiscriminate. Soldiers raped women in the streets, nuns were dragged from convents, old men were murdered for their rings, children were killed for sport. The Crusaders had been promised unlimited loot, and they took it. The Venetians were more organized, they didn't rape and murder as much. They focused on economic assets, they seized the best harbors, the best trade routes, the best properties. They took strategic islands, Crete, Corfu, entire regions of the Byzantine Empire. They gained monopolies. From now on, Venetian merchants controlled Eastern Mediterranean trade, completely, permanently. The Byzantine economy was destroyed, and Venice became the richest city in Europe. The treasure taken from Constantinople was staggering. The official division was 400,000 silver marks. That's 92 tons of silver, worth over $100 million today, but that was just the official count. The amount stolen and hidden was far greater. Soldiers hid jewels in their clothes, melted gold into portable bars, smuggled relics back to Europe. Estimates suggest the total plunder was worth over $1 billion in today's money. It was the greatest theft in medieval history. The spoils were divided. Venice took its 3/8, about 150,000 marks, plus all the strategic territory, plus trade monopolies, plus revenge. The debt was paid with interest. The Crusaders took their 5/8, divided among thousands of soldiers. Some got rich, most got a few trinkets, but they had fulfilled their vow. Technically, they had gone on crusade, just not to the Holy Land, to Constantinople instead. Close enough. A new empire was declared, the Latin Empire of Constantinople. The Crusaders elected Baldwin of Flanders as emperor. The Byzantine Empire was carved up. French nobles took Greece, Italian nobles took the islands, the Venetians took the coasts. The Byzantines were scattered, refugees in their own land. 3 Byzantine successor states formed, in Nicaea, in Trebizond, in Epirus. They claimed to be the true Byzantine Empire in exile, and they vowed to retake Constantinople. It took 57 years. 1261, Michael VII Palaiologos recaptured Constantinople. The Latin Empire fell. The Byzantines returned, but it was a hollow victory. Constantinople was a shadow. The population had dropped from 400,000 to 35,000. The palaces were ruins. The churches were stripped. The walls were damaged. The economy was gone. Venice controlled the trade. The Byzantines controlled nothing. The empire that had ruled for 1,000 years was reduced to a small state around Constantinople. Weak, poor, dependent on foreign powers for survival. The Byzantine Empire lasted another 192 years, 1261 to 1453, but it was already dead. The sack of 1204 killed it. Everything after was a slow funeral. The Byzantines tried to recover. They negotiated with the West, begged for help against the rising Ottoman threat, promised church reunification again. Nobody cared. The West had taken what it wanted. There was nothing left to steal. 1453. Sultan Mehmed II besieged Constantinople. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, defended the walls with 7,000 men against 80,000 Ottomans. The walls that had held for 1,100 years finally fell, to cannons, to gunpowder, to overwhelming force. Constantine died fighting on the walls. The Byzantine Empire ended. The Ottoman Empire began, and the Renaissance started in Italy. Because all those stolen Byzantine books, the ones that weren't burned, ended up in Italian libraries. Greek scholars fled to Italy, brought their knowledge, their language, their manuscripts. The Italian Renaissance was built on Byzantine plunder. But let's go back to the real question. Why did this happen? Debt. In 1171, Emperor Manuel arrested Venetian merchants, seized their property. It was a reasonable decision. They were too powerful, too privileged. They needed to be controlled, but it created an enemy. Venice wanted revenge and compensation. For 30 years, Venice waited. Then opportunity came. The Fourth Crusade needed ships, couldn't pay, owed Venice. Venice used that debt as leverage, redirected the crusade. First to Zara, then to Constantinople. Young Alexios IV promised payment, created a second debt to pay the first debt. When he couldn't pay, the Crusaders took payment by force. They sacked Constantinople, took everything, destroyed the richest city in Christendom. Why? Because they owed money, and in medieval economics, debts were paid one way or another. Here's the brutal lesson. Debt makes you vulnerable. When you owe money, you lose sovereignty, you lose control, you do things you wouldn't otherwise do. The Crusaders were supposed to fight Muslims. They fought Christians. Why debt? They were supposed to go to Egypt. They went to Constantinople. Why debt? They were supposed to be holy warriors. They became looters and rapists. Why debt? Debt corrupts, debt controls, debt destroys, and the Byzantines learned this too late. When you make enemies, they remember. When you seize their property, they want revenge. And if they control your debts, they control you. Manuel thought he was asserting sovereignty in 1171. He was, but he was also creating the conditions for 1204 for the destruction of his empire, because Venice never forgot, and when the opportunity came, Venice struck, used debt as a weapon, turned Crusaders into mercenaries, and bankrupted Byzantium. You might think this is medieval history, ancient grudges, irrelevant today. You're completely wrong. This pattern repeats constantly. Debt as a weapon, economic warfare disguised as help, modern examples everywhere. Greece 2010, the country was bankrupt, couldn't pay its debts. The European Union and IMF offered a bailout, loans to keep Greece afloat, but with conditions: austerity, budget cuts, tax increases, privatization, selling state assets. Greece lost economic sovereignty. The EU and IMF controlled Greek economic policy, just like the OPDA controlled Ottoman taxes, just like Venice controlled Crusader actions. It's the same pattern: lend money, impose conditions, control the debtor. Greece is still recovering. The economy shrank 25% in a decade. Youth unemployment hit 60%, a generation destroyed by debt, by austerity, by foreign control. Ukraine today borrowed billions from the West for weapons, for survival against Russia, noble cause necessary. But after the war, whenever it ends, Ukraine will owe enormous debts, and the creditors will want repayment or concession, access to resources, privatization of industries, political influence. Ukraine may win the war and lose its sovereignty. To debt, Argentina, defaulted on debt 9 times, currently owes $45 billion to the IMF. The IMF dictates economic policy. Argentina cannot make independent decisions because they owe money and the creditor makes the rules. Sri Lanka borrowed from China for infrastructure, ports, roads, couldn't repay. China took the port, 99-year lease. Chinese military ships now dock there. Sri Lanka lost a strategic asset because of debt. China calls it investment, others call it debt colonization. It's the same pattern: lend money, wait for default, take assets. Just like 1204. The lesson of 1204 is brutal and timeless. Never let foreign powers control your debts, because debt is leverage, debt is control, debt is a weapon. The Byzantines were once the richest empire in the Christian world. They survived for 1,000 years, outlasted Rome, outlasted the Persians, outlasted the Arabs, and they were destroyed by Christians, their fellow believers, their supposed allies. Why? Because they owed money, and the creditors came to collect. Constantinople burned not because it was weak militarily, it burned because it was weak economically. The walls were strong, the treasury was empty, and in the end, economics always wins. You can have the best walls in the world, the greatest city, 1,000 years of history, but if you owe money to the wrong people, it doesn't matter. They will come, they will take, they will destroy, and they will call it justice. The Venetians never saw themselves as villains, they saw themselves as creditors collecting debts. The Crusaders never saw themselves as criminals, they saw themselves as holy warriors claiming payment. But Constantinople saw the truth. This wasn't about religion, this wasn't about honor, this was about money, about debt, about revenge, about greed. The richest city in Christendom was destroyed by Christians for profit, and the world changed. Venice became a superpower. The Byzantine Empire became a corpse, and the lesson was written in blood and gold. Never trust your creditors, never let debt control you, because when they come to collect, they don't bring accountants, they bring armies. This is cinematic history tales where empires fall, where economics kills, where history becomes cinema. If you want more stories like this, epic betrayals, economic warfare, and debts paid in blood, hit subscribe, because the pattern repeats. The faces change, the empires change, but debt remains, as powerful as any weapon, as destructive as any army, and more dangerous than any enemy, because your creditor looks like a friend until the bill comes due. Next time, how the tulip mania destroyed the Dutch economy when a flower bulb cost more than a house, and then cost nothing, the first speculative bubble in history. See you then.